love setting myself ambitious goals. So as you can imagine, I also really like New Year's resolutions. And last year, for the first time in ages, I actually set myself a resolution about my physical health. So I decided I would start going to the gym 5 times a week. Well, that didn't really last. It lasted for about 2 weeks, maybe even only 1. Have you ever experienced anything like that? You know, just not really making your resolutions happen, not really hitting your goals? If so, then today's video is definitely for you. Hi, I'm Cornelia, the founder and head of psychology at Breeze, the platform for ambitious people who want to lead driven lives with less stress and more ease. And today we're going to be talking about goals. But we're not just going to be looking at anything about goals. We're actually going to be focusing on setbacks, just like the one I just talked about. So we're going to be looking into this problem of, you know, when you can't hit your goal and you start feeling guilty, you're not really happy with yourself. And you know what? The solution is not to just stop setting yourselves goals, because let's be honest, if we set ourselves good goals, they help us be productive, they help us, move forward in life, and they can even help us feel less stress rather than more. And still, sometimes we just don't quite get it right. And trust me, I'm a specialist for stress. I work with goals. I work with people on their goals. And still, every now and again, it also happens to me. So what we're going to be doing today is we're going to be looking very briefly into how to set yourselves goals. But don't worry, we're not going to stick with that. If you want to learn more about that, refer to our blog. We actually have a really good one on how to set yourself smart goals. So what we're going to be focusing on today is actually the next step. What happens if you can't hit your goals? And how to move forward from there. All right, let's get started. Now, before we dive straight into the topic of setbacks, and how evaluating your goals can actually help you overcome them, let's have a very brief glance back at how to actually set yourselves effective goals. And in order to do so, I would like to introduce you to a scientific model originally coined by Jjoin, and it's called the SMART model of goal setting. Some of you might actually have heard of it before because it's a very popular model on goals. Either way, it's actually one of those scientific models that can really help you increase the effectiveness of the goals you set yourselves. Let's go through it. So when we talk about SMART goals, we actually don't just mean intelligent goals. Even though, let's be honest, a good goal is also an intelligent goal. But SMART is actually an acronym. So each of the letters gives you a hint at how you should really formulate your goals so they can help you be productive, efficient, and ideally not stressed when following them. First of all, we start with the S, and S stands for specific. So please don't just say, oh, I want to become a better person, or I want to be a better student, because what does that even really mean? That's not specific enough. The second point would be measurable. So you want to make sure that you can really measure whether you've reached your goal or not. And a good question to ask yourselves in order to make sure you achieve this point is, how will I know that I've arrived? How will I know I've met my goal? That is exactly how you can also measure it. The third point out of SMART is then the A, achievable. So be aware of where you're standing at this moment in time. And then ask yourselves, is it realistic for me to be able to achieve my goal with the resources and maybe also within the time frame given? Only a goal that seems at least, somewhat realistic is a goal that's going to be motivating for you. Of course, you can stretch yourselves. I mean, to be honest, it's nice to be ambitious, isn't it? But at the same time, it needs to be at least, let's say 50% believable, maybe even 80. Right. The fourth letter of SMART is the R, and R is relevant. So please don't set yourselves goals just for the sake of setting them. It is really important that the goals you want to achieve are really something that has relevance for you personally. So ideally, you should properly burn for those goals. And last but not least, we have time-bound, T. Time-bound means that a goal is not a good goal if you more or less just say, oh, at some point in my life, I want to achieve this. You really want to have a deadline. You really want to have an end point to your goal where you say, okay, I want to achieve this by ... Now, maybe let's look at those 5 points with an example. And if it's all right for you, we're just going to use an example from my life. So personally, I play volleyball and beach volleyball. And I would say I've been doing it for quite a few years, so I'm a decent hobby player. But one thing that I still can't do properly is the high serve. What does it mean? It means I just can't really hit it into the field all the time. And that's something that I would really like to improve. Now, if I want to set myself a SMART goal around this, it's not enough for me to say, oh, I want to become better at volleyball, because that's not specific enough. I actually need to say, I want to improve my high serve. That's a specific goal. It's one specific skill. But then I also want to make it measurable. That's the second point. So what does it mean to improve my high serve? How will I know I have arrived? And for example, that could be that I say I want to hit 8 out of 10 high serves over the net and into the field. That's measurable. Now, looking at whether this goal is achievable or not, I need to actually introspect a bit. So what is my skill level now and what's my time frame? I would say with my skill level now, yes, I guess that's a skill that I could improve on. I think I'm at a point where this would be the next best step. And my time frame, well, this comes a bit later, but there's no real urgency. I'm not gonna say I want to achieve this in the next 2 days, because that would not be achievable. I just need to make sure that the time frame I set myself is realistic and believable. Now, the next part would be the question of relevance. Do I really need to hit a high serve? Well, in my case, trust me. If you play regularly with your friends and they always laugh at you for not ever getting your high serve right, yes, there is a relevance to this. And I really want to make it happen. Now, last but not least, time bound. What is my deadline? And this is the point where we need to be careful, because sometimes, the ego likes to be vague because that gives us an escape route. And we don't want to let it have that. So we really want to set ourselves a clear deadline. And I guess in my case, I'm based in Austria and here at the moment it's winter. Something realistic would be to say by the end of next beach volleyball season, so in about half a year. That's when I want to hit my goal. And trust me, I will make this even more specific with one specific date. So most likely I will set one specific date at the end of the upcoming season where I'm gonna say, okay, by this date, I wanna have improved my high serve, which means I wanna be able to hit 8 out of 10 high serves over the net and into the field. And that's a SMART goal. Okay, now let's dive straight into the main question of today's video. How can goal setting and working with goals help us overcome setbacks? And for this, we're actually going to look into an extension of the SMART model. And that's also why I introduced it to you before. We're now looking into something called SMART goals. And as you can already imagine, SMART does not just mean more intelligent. Quite the opposite. The ER, again, is an extension to our acronym. So again, those 2 letters can give us a good hint at how to proceed with our goals, to actually help us stay motivated and overcome any potential setbacks we might experience. So let's look at those 2 letters. First of all, we've got the E, and E stands for evaluated. Now, this whole model comes from a background of organizations. And in organizations, you can imagine what that means. So in organizations, we would like evaluations from our leaders, from our managers. We want to get feedback. And this is really a natural human thing. When we're on our way to reaching a goal, or if we're trying to reach a goal, we want to know where we are. We want to know how we're progressing. And stay with me for a minute, because I will show you in a second how you can do that for yourselves. But just thinking about the organizational background, it just means that we really want to hear how we're doing. We want to know if we're on the right track or if we need to course correct somewhere. So that's the E. The R stands for rewarded, or at least recognized. And that means that ideally we don't just want general feedback, but if we're doing well, we also want to feel that. We want to have that emotional connection. We want to get a bit of praise or recognition. And as I said, ideally in a company, this could come from colleagues or the leadership team. But now the big question is, how can you do that for yourselves? So let's rewind once more and look at the E, evaluate it. And this is a step that ideally you should already recognize and remember when you start setting your goals. So when you're setting your SMART goals, go a step further and make them smarter. So think about how you could possibly evaluate your goals. How can you, for yourselves, set yourselves a check-in rhythm and really make that specific. So ask yourselves, when am I going to check where I am, how I am on track or not? And just so you know, if you need some support with this, we actually have a worksheet that can help you with evaluating your goals. So check out the links below. Either way, what does evaluating mean? Evaluating can mean one of 2 things. On the one side, you want to check in and see how far towards my goal am I. And this is if you're on track. it just shows you that you're on track. It shows you what your next step is. But on the other side, if you're not on track, this can be the point where you can really find out why. So the question is not just how am I proceeding, but possibly also why am I not proceeding the way I want to? Now let's relate this back to my example from the beginning. You know, my example of going to the gym 5 times a week that failed. Well, at my first check-in point, I realized that. Obviously, I'd been maybe twice in that week. So I was asking myself, okay, what's wrong with my goal? Why am I not making the progress I want to make? And I realized, which yes, some people might say I could have known from the beginning, but I realized at that point that my goal just wasn't achievable. Why not? It wasn't just a lack of motivation or that I had really sore muscles. Actually, the main problem was really a feasibility issue. I have to be at work late at least twice a week. And the problem is, at that time, my gym is already closed. So basically what happens is, I just fail at my goal automatically. And once I realized that, at this evaluation stage at my check-in, what I did was just slightly rephrase my New Year's resolution. So I changed it from go to the gym 5 times a week to work out 5 times a week. And that now allowed me for the flexibility to go to the gym 3 times a week whenever I could and make the other 2 days where I had to stay at work late a home workout. So I could simply come home from work and then just do some yoga or use one of those cool inspirational YouTube videos to actually do a proper workout. Now, after that, my goal progressed a lot better, but I wouldn't have figured it out if I hadn't had that purposeful check-in point. And that's why the E is so important. We can then move on to the last stage, the R of smarter. As I said, the R stands for rewarded or at least recognized. And this means that at these check-in stages, I should not just be critical with myself and not just look at my setbacks. Quite the opposite. I also need to see when I'm progressing well. And it's hugely important for us to celebrate our wins. And I don't just mean celebrate when you hit the goal. No, definitely celebrate each step along the way. That is what's really going to keep you motivated and not stressed about your goals. So make sure that you do that favor for yourselves. And from now on, set yourselves smart hair goals. Okay, now let's briefly summarize what we talked about in this video. We first had a brief glance at how to set yourselves effective goals. And for that, we looked at the SMART model of goal setting. And as I mentioned before, science proves that actually setting SMART goals can help you stay productive and feel even more motivated. So if you want to go into more depth with this, make sure to check out our blog, because we actually have a really helpful blog post on how to set yourselves really good SMART goals. We then moved on to the topic of smart hair goals. And this was the main question. How do we deal with setbacks? How do we stay motivated? And that's also where the rubber really hits the road. This is where you can gain an advantage. And if you need any more support with setting yourselves those smart hair goals, with those last 2 steps, then check out the worksheet we created for you. This is also going to be dropped below. Now, last but not least, if you want to learn more about which setbacks you might be facing, then make sure to hit the like button and subscribe to our channel, because we have some really interesting videos coming up about the different types of setbacks and stresses that we might experience in our lives. So stay tuned for that. And now, thank you very much for listening to us today. It was a pleasure, and I hope to see you soon. Bye!